The courtroom was filled with murmurs as three identical young faces entered together, their footsteps echoing across the polished marble floor. People shifted in their seats, whispering about the triplets who had come to defend their mother in a case that seemed hopeless from the start. Their mother, a woman of modest means, sat trembling at the defendant's table, eyes fixed on her children as if drawing strength from their presence. Across from them, the imposing billionaire judge adjusted his glasses, but when his gaze landed on the triplets, something flickered in his expression, an unease he quickly masked with authority. The triplets stood tall, their resemblance so striking it was as if one reflection had split into three living beings. With coordinated confidence, they introduced themselves to the court, not as victims begging for mercy, but as children determined to protect their mother's honor. Each word they spoke carried conviction, weaving together memories of sacrifice and resilience. The judge, who was known for his cold, ruthless demeanor, leaned forward, his pen tapping nervously against the desk. His heart raced with a question he dared not yet articulate, for the mirror of their faces whispered a truth he had long buried. The eldest of the three began recounting stories of nights when their mother worked double shifts just to keep food on the table. The second spoke of the humiliation she endured in silence, never allowing her children to feel the weight of her suffering. The youngest, with a voice trembling yet resolute, declared that their mother was their hero, a woman who had given them life and hope against all odds. The courtroom fell into a hush, every eye moist with sympathy. The judge, however, felt a storm inside him, a storm fueled by recognition, by the haunting familiarity of their eyes. The lawyer on the opposing side attempted to discredit their words, waving papers filled with accusations meant to paint their mother as deceitful. Yet the triplets remained firm, refusing to let lies overshadow the truth of their mother's sacrifices. As the judge studied their faces, he felt time peel back like fragile layers, revealing a younger version of himself, standing with the woman he once loved. A woman he had abandoned in pursuit of power, wealth, and status. His chest tightened as the realization deepened. These were not strangers. They were his children. A tremor ran through his hand as he lifted his gavel, struggling to maintain composure. The courtroom saw only a man in authority, but within him raged the guilt of decades. His mind replayed the night he had walked away from the woman who now sat before him, broken by accusations she did not deserve. He had told himself she would be fine, that leaving her was necessary for his ambitions. Yet here, standing before him, were living testaments of her strength and his failure as a father. The eldest triplet locked eyes with him, and for a moment it was as though the walls of the courtroom dissolved. There was something in that gaze, accusation, longing, and unspoken truth, that pierced his carefully crafted armor. The judge shifted uncomfortably, his throat dry, his mind screaming at him to stop this charade. But the law was watching. The people were watching, and his name, carved in wealth and influence, stood on trial alongside the very woman he once betrayed. The mother, sensing his turmoil, lifted her chin with quiet dignity. Though years of hardship had etched lines into her face, there remained a spark of defiance in her eyes. She did not beg for mercy. Instead, she demanded justice. Her silence spoke louder than any argument, and her children's voices amplified her truth. For the judge, each moment became unbearable. He saw in her the ghost of the past, the woman who had once believed in him before he had traded love for luxury. As the defense rested, the courtroom waited in tense silence for the judge's ruling. He stared down at the documents, his vision blurring. The law demanded one thing, but his conscience demanded another. He could not ignore the resemblance, the undeniable blood that bound him to the very children who now stood as her shield. For the first time in his career, the billionaire judge's mask cracked, and a single word trembled at the edge of his lips. "For mine." But he swallowed it back, knowing the revelation would shatter more than just his reputation. With a heavy heart, he rose to deliver his verdict. His voice, usually sharp and commanding, faltered as he spoke of justice, fairness, and truth. He dismissed the false charges against the mother, his gavel striking not with arrogance but with redemption. The triplets embraced their mother, tears streaming down their faces, unaware that the man behind the bench was more than just the judge. He was their father. The courtroom erupted in applause, yet for him, the sound was a painful reminder of years lost. When the room cleared, the judge lingered in staring at the family he had never known. His chest ached with the weight of unspoken words. He longed to step down, to call their names, to beg forgiveness from the woman who had borne his children and carried the burden alone. But fear held him captive. Fear of rejection, of truth, of the scandal that would follow. As the mother and triplets walked out hand in hand, the billionaire judge realized that for all his wealth, he was the poorest man in that room, for he had gained the world but lost the chance to be a father. That night the judge could not sleep. His mansion, filled with priceless art and treasures, felt like an empty prison. Every tick of the clock echoed like a reminder of his failures. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, but even the burn in his throat could not drown the memory of the triplets' faces. He saw himself in them, the curve of their jaw, the fire in their eyes, even the stubborn tilt of their heads. The truth gnawed at him, and for the first time in years, he wept alone. Meanwhile, the triplets and their mother returned home, exhausted yet relieved. They celebrated their small victory, not knowing the judge's personal storm. The eldest son noticed the way the judge had looked at them, but brushed it off as intimidation. Their mother, however, sat silently, lost in her own thoughts. She, too, had recognized something in his gaze, a shadow of the man she once loved. She clenched her fists, unwilling to revisit old wounds. To her, he was a ghost best left buried. Days passed, but the judge could not focus on his duties. Every case felt meaningless compared to the truth he carried inside. His assistants noticed his distraction, his unusual softness in rulings, but none dared question him. At night, he drove past the neighborhood where his children lived, parking his luxury car a street away, watching from a distance like a criminal. He saw the triplets laugh, play, and protect their mother, their bond unbreakable. It was a life he could have been part of, had he chosen differently. Finally, he could no longer bear the silence. He wrote a letter, carefully, painfully, explaining everything, how he had loved their mother in his youth, how he had left her for ambition, how he had never stopped thinking about her. He confessed his suspicion that the triplets were his children, and begged for forgiveness. With trembling hands, he sealed the letter in an envelope and left it at their doorstep, unable to face them directly. As he drove away, his heart pounded with fear. The next morning, the triplets discovered the envelope. Their mother snatched it quickly, recognizing the handwriting instantly. Her face paled, and her hands shook as she opened it. Every word cut into her like a blade, reopening scars she thought had healed. She tried to hide the letter, but her children pressed her until she finally told them the truth. Shock rippled through the house. The man who had judged their case, the man they despised, was the father they never knew. The eldest was furious. "He left us," he knew, and still walked away. The second was confused, torn between anger and curiosity. The youngest, however, whispered softly, "But doesn't that mean he wanted to come back?" Their mother sat silently, tears streaming down her face. She had protected them from this truth for so long, but now it was too late. The decision of whether to forgive or hate their father was no longer hers. It was theirs. The triplets debated late into the night. Resentment clashed with longing, and rage battled against curiosity. Finally, they decided to confront him, not as children desperate for a father, but as people demanding answers. Together, they marched into the courthouse the next day, their mother reluctantly following behind. The judge, seeing them enter, felt his knees weaken. His past had finally caught him. The courtroom was empty, but the air was thick with tension. The eldest son stepped forward first, his voice cold. "Why?" he demanded. "Why did you leave her? Why did you leave us?" The judge's lips trembled as he tried to speak, but the weight of decades of silence choked him. His heart pounded as the woman he once loved stared at him, her eyes filled with pain. "Say it," she whispered. "I tell them what you told me all those years ago." And so, with tears streaming down his face, the judge confessed everything. His hunger for wealth, his cowardice, his selfish choice to abandon love for ambition. He admitted that he had seen them as infants but had turned his back, convincing himself they would be fine without him. His voice cracked as he said, "It was the worst mistake of my life." The triplets listened, their faces a storm of emotions, but none could deny the sincerity in his voice. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Then the youngest broke it. "You can't change the past," she whispered. "But what about now? What are you going to do for us now?" The judge fell to his knees, shocking everyone. The Billionaire, feared by many, knelt before his children, begging for a chance to be part of their lives. He offered not money, not power, but his presence and his heart. Whether they accepted him or not, he vowed never to abandon them again. The mother's eyes softened, though her heart still ached. She saw in him the boy she had once loved, buried under years of arrogance. "It's not up to me anymore," she said, turning to the triplets. They exchanged glances, torn between forgiveness and fury. At last, the eldest spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. "We won't call you father, not yet, but if you truly mean it, prove it, earn it." The judge nodded, tears blurring his vision. For the first time in decades, he felt hope. He began showing up, not as a judge, not as a billionaire, but as a man trying to repair broken ties. He attended their school events, sat at their humble dinner table, and learned the rhythm of their lives. Slowly, walls began to crack. The second triplet started asking him questions about his past. The youngest smiled at his awkward attempts to cook, and even the eldest, though still guarded, allowed him small victories. Their mother, watching from the sidelines, felt her bitterness soften. The world soon noticed the change. The once cold and ruthless judge now ruled with compassion, his judgments tempered by humanity. Rumors spread, and scandals threatened to expose his hidden past, but he no longer cared. For him, family mattered more than reputation. He found joy not in wealth, but in laughter around a modest dinner table, in the warmth of children's voices, in the forgiveness that slowly bloomed in their hearts. But challenges remained. His wealthy associates sneered at his choices. Some even threatened to strip him of influence. Yet, he stood firm, declaring that he would rather lose everything than abandon his family again. His resolve inspired many, turning him from a feared billionaire judge into a symbol of redemption. For the triplets, seeing his sacrifice proved his sincerity more than words ever could. One evening, as the family gathered, the eldest finally spoke the words that had long weighed on his heart. "You're not the man I wanted you to be," he said slowly, "but maybe you're becoming the man we need now." The judge's eyes filled with tears as his son for the first time called him Dad. The other two followed, their voices trembling, and their mother looked on, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. The judge embraced them, feeling decades of regret wash away in that single moment. He had lost so much, years of laughter, birthdays, first steps, and milestones. But he had been given another chance. Though the past could not be erased, the future stretched before them, fragile yet full of promise. For the first time in his life, he felt truly rich, not in money, but in love. As the seasons changed, so did their lives. The triplets grew stronger, guided not just by their mother's resilience, but also by the father they once despised. Together, they built new memories, rewriting the story of their broken family. The judge, once a symbol of cold authority, became a man humbled by love, proving that even the wealthiest heart can be poor until it learns to give. The town whispered about the unusual family, children defending their mother, a billionaire judge humbled into fatherhood, but those whispers no longer mattered. What mattered was the bond forged in pain, forgiveness, and second chances. The judge finally understood that love was the only legacy worth leaving, and his children, once strangers, now carried his heart. The mother, too, found healing. Though scars remained, she allowed herself to smile again, no longer carrying the burden alone. She watched her children grow with both pride and relief, knowing that even though life had been cruel, it had also given her redemption. She no longer saw the judge as the man who abandoned her, but as the man who finally returned. And so, in that once cold courtroom where the truth began to unfold, history was rewritten. A billionaire judge who once chose ambition over love found himself humbled by the very children he had forsaken, and a family, once broken, learned that forgiveness, though painful, could rebuild even the deepest wounds. The world saw him as a man of power, but to the triplets and their mother, he was simply a dad, a man worth saving after all.